Hey there, everybody. It's Ann Westerheim from Ikaru, and I want to thank you for joining us today for our cybersecurity webinar. Cybersecurity Awareness Month starts in October, just 1 week away, and now we're getting a kickstart to the event. My clock is still telling me it's 12:14. We'll be starting in about 30 seconds. Thanks for joining us. All right, thank you, everybody. It's 12:15, so we're going to get started. Our cybersecurity webinar today is Smart and Affordable Strategies for Small Business. And Cybersecurity Awareness Month starts in October. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're Ikaru. We're an IT and cyber firm serving small businesses. We're in Westford, right on Route 110, near the 99 restaurant, not too far from Kimball's. And we've worked with hundreds of local small businesses, and our mission is to provide enterprise class IT support and strategy to small businesses. Basically, everything a big company gets with an IT department, we want to be doing for small business. And a big part of what we do is education, training, and security awareness. It's just 7 days until Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We are a proud champion again this year. We're hoping to get Dan Elliott to speak next month, for those of you who got to see the presentation last year. But as we're going to talk about in this presentation, being cyber aware is really a responsibility for everybody in an organization, and we're going to cover a lot of different things that small businesses need to know about. All right, so crime by the numbers. I'm just going to go through a little bit of background, but right now, cybercrime is bigger than all forms of organized crime put together, and it just keeps growing. It's a moneymaker. We saw recently in the news, as though the pandemic weren't complicating things enough. A couple of school districts got hit with ransomware. The Hartford School District, another school in North Carolina, and this is just keep going. This is going to keep going. So all businesses, regardless of size, are at risk. And this is one of the most common misconceptions we get. A lot of folks will tell us, well, gee, we're just a small business. We're just 5 people. Nobody's after us, because a lot of folks get lulled into a false sense of security because the headlines all focus on very big cybercrime. There's just as much activity in smaller organizations, but it doesn't make the front page of national news. Only a very small percentage of cyber attacks are actually targeted attacks. So what that means is they're just sort of attacks of people are using automated tools. They're not genius hackers. They actually buy tools to commit these attacks, and they're just indiscriminate. They're just trying to figure out, we'll just blast a whole bunch of stuff out there. Doesn't cost them much of anything, and they'll see where it sticks. And Visa estimates that 95% of all credit card breaches are related to their smallest customers. So things are hitting small businesses. That's the number one thing that we want to make sure. Part of our mission is making sure that folks are aware of this. And this is not to scare people. This is just to let people know this is real. And what we're going to show you, there's a lot of smart and affordable things that smaller organizations can do to protect yourself. Some of the headlines, Twitter had a recent very high profile attack recently. And interestingly, the FBI was able to solve that one within days. Sadly, for a smaller attack, if it's less than $1 million, I don't even think the FBI will really be able to do any investigation whatsoever. Since the pandemic started, FBI's complaints have gone up to 3,000 to 4,000 complaints a day, up from a very high level of 1,000 a day before the pandemic. So this is a really big issue. And this is a screenshot of showing, one of the scariest things that can happen. You've heard about ransomware. Ransomware is when basically your files are held hostage. The malware gets on your system, and we're going to talk about how. And then you get a timer that says, well, you can get your files back if you pay us a lot of money. And they don't even know who you are. A lot of strategies around how to respond to this, but basically you want to do everything possible to not be in this situation. The other thing that's becoming more and more common is folks are not the criminals are not stopping at just holding your files ransom. They will actually distribute files too. They'll leak them and they'll threaten to leak them. So uh, this is something, this is like the scariest thing that you can see on your computer. Hopefully it doesn't happen to anybody on this call, but it is real. All right. And the target really is everybody. So nobody's under the radar. If you're a 5-person company, these automated attacks can get you. And it's just, be conscious of it and take appropriate steps. And with the right precautions, you can drastically reduce the chances that you're going to be impacted by one of these events. And sadly, it's kind of like a crime wave in a neighborhood. If in your own home, if you heard about break-ins in the area, you're going to probably check out, do you have the right locks on your doors? Do you have an alarm system? There's a lot of things that you'd probably want to tighten up if you heard about crime in the area. And that's what's going on in the cyberspace right now. On average, firewalls are just getting, say, pinged by folks thousands of times a day. And we're going to go through what the protections are in place and how you can deal with this. All right. We talk a lot about layers of security, and the concept is defense in depth. And I'm just going to move something on my screen here. So if you think about, one way to think about this is like bulletproof glass. Each layer that builds up bulletproof glass in itself is not very strong. But when it's put together, it's how it's put together that gives a strong defense. And that's the same thing that we're talking about with security. And I'm going to go through a lot of different things, and we'll get questions from folks. Well, I've got a backup, so I'm all set. Or I've got cyber insurance, so I'm all set. It's no one thing can protect you. And I've even heard radio ads of saying, just do this, this one, antivirus or whatever. It's really a combination of things together that keep you secure. And what I want to show you is that I'm going to try not to use too much technical jargon. Try to explain in really simple terms to understand like what the risks are and what each element protects against. And you'll see that when you put everything together, no one piece needs to be that complicated. No one piece needs to be that expensive, but together they give you a very high level of security. And what we're seeing right now, there's a recent stat that I read that 85% of consumers don't want to do business with a company where they're concerned about their security practices. And I think this is really a really important message for small business, because if folks get a perception that, well, gee, I like the people at this smaller company and they're local, but I'm not really sure if they've got the right security in place and I don't want to put my data at risk, it's going to make a difference. So the things that you can do, I think more and more it's going to be important for all small businesses to really start being a little more vocal about the security practices that they put in place. And I think it's a differentiator for a business. Consumers are going to expect this. And we don't want to create a situation where they feel like, well, I'm going to go with the bigger company because I think they're going to be more secure, which isn't even true, but that's perception. So we're going to go through a lot of different things on this sheet today. So one of the things in the upper left-hand corner, and some of you may have seen this before, and I actually have this in a handout so you can download it. And I'm going to cover in various depth a lot of things on here and kind of show you the actionable things you can do to make it better. And number one is just doing a security risk assessment. Doesn't have to be fancy. Sometimes we come in and we do them for a company. We have rapid fire tools. We can run reports, etc. Or you can just go through with your team and kind of go through this checklist and just kind of evaluate what are you doing right now. But it's very important to know what your baseline is. Going through some of the things we're going to talk about in here are firewalls, web gateway security, which I'll explain in very simple terms, backups, spam filters, etc. But these are basically the elements that make up that bulletproof glass. All right, so kind of the first line of defense is the firewall on your network. And that's on that checklist. I'm not going in order. This is sort of, I'm kind of going in order of kind of the most basic of your foundation. But the firewall, and this is a really simple diagram on the right, but the firewall is a device, it's a piece of hardware. That's a SonicWall TZ300. If you're on our network already, you probably have one of the SonicWalls, either this version, the 400, the 250, one of them. And that's a device that through software and hardware, isolates your network. And LAN stands for local area network. So on the left, this is you. And on the right, it's the wide area network. And that's basically everybody else in the world who's connected to the internet. So uh, this is a really foundational piece of protection for your office. Now, with folks working mobile, this gets a little more complicated because you've got things beyond your network to protect, but this really is the foundational kind of starting point. And we advise folks to get a business class firewall. We're partnered with SonicWall. That's the #1 small business firewall brand out there. Uh, if you have Comcast or Verizon, they put in something pretty basic, but the level of business class, the ways these devices can analyze traffic, packet level inspection, um, deep packet inspection. They do a lot more than just the basic. And if you'd say, yeah, you're going to spend some money on it with the full security license, maybe it's around $1,000. It depends on, which. Some of them are less expensive. Some of them are more, depending on how many users you have in traffic. But if you spread that out over, the number of users you have and what it costs you basically per month to have it, this is the #1 important thing that you need to have to protect your network. It needs to be a business class firewall. The next thing that's kind of foundational, and if you're working along on the spreadsheet, this is computer updates. We've been in our monthly newsletter reporting on Patch Tuesday for, whatever, 15 years at this point. Microsoft releases security patches every month to address vulnerability. So the most recent one was September 9th, just a couple of weeks ago. They addressed 129 vulnerabilities. Microsoft has a formal program where they do this. All other vendors do as well. You probably noticed your phone. If you have an iPhone, you're getting updates on a regular basis. Adobe Acrobat, all the different programs, third parties. This is probably the most, because so much of the world is running on Microsoft, this is probably the most prominent program. But as bad actors discover vulnerabilities, then the software vendors will fix them. Critical ones are, we test and release them within a day. Other ones get tested in advance. Every once in a while, there is a side effect of one of these patches, but it's extremely important. This is an important part of your foundation. So anybody on a basic support plan with us is getting security patches done. We monitor them. We have a full-time person who just works on checking security patches and backups for all our clients. Extremely important part of the foundation. Another really important part of the security foundation is web, we call it on the worksheet, web gateway security. You may have heard us talk about Cisco Umbrella. This is a product by Cisco that we put in as part of our basic plan. On every support plan has this. And what that is, it's predictive intelligence. It's basically a big data application. They're collecting data on internet traffic around the world. This is extremely important as your users go mobile. When you're in the office, your firewall is protecting you from the outside world. And when you move your laptop out of the office, and also for various things that maybe the firewall hasn't detected yet, this is sort of like a credit card fraud alert. Like if you're on the web and suddenly, you click on a link and it's going to some foreign country, Russia, China. What this does is it analyzes all the traffic around the world and it finds quickly, okay, wait a second, something's happening. This link is not good. This is unusual behavior. You may wind up maybe typing a URL incorrectly. So you think you're going to Bank of America, but you're going somewhere else. This is going to help protect you against that and block that. And they're looking at billions of requests every day and analyzing this. And it's basically the software that runs. So we put this on every computer that we work with, everything that's under managed service with us, and it's looking at this all the time. So it's looking at just odd behavior, things that are out of the ordinary, like, wait a second, this user probably did not mean to go to this site. It looks like they're trying to go somewhere else, and we'll help block that. All right, another part of the really basic building blocks is spam protection. And it sounds like spam is really annoying. It can clutter an inbox. Beyond that, though, there's a lot of malicious stuff that's being spread through email, and it's estimated that 90% of cyber attacks occur via email. So we recommend putting a spam filter in place. We're partnered with Sophos Reflection, and also Barracuda on this one. For a couple of dollars a mailbox, and this will filter your mail in one place. And that way your mail is protected, whether you're reading it on your laptop, your desktop, your iPad, your phone, wherever you're testing it. There's one central quarantine. That's actually an important point. You want to have one place. You don't want to have multiple quarantines. Two is not better than one in this case, because the idea of sometimes you get false positives. Email is really the lifeblood of the business. That's how so much communication is done. So you need to make sure you're getting your mail, you're not getting the false positives. You don't want to be checking in multiple locations. And 90% of when folks end up getting exposed, 90% of what's going on is stuff's getting in through email. And I just want to make one more point on the security patching, which is kind of this basic foundational kind of thing, is even when you read about high profile breaches, often they'll say it was traced back, something wasn't patched in the system. So this level of foundational stuff is extremely important. It's not expensive and it's not hard to do, but it will help protect from the vast majority of threats. And that's why we call it foundational security. And the other really basic fundamental thing that all businesses need to be aware of is backup. Okay, and backup sounds really simple, sounds really basic, but a lot of times we find that folks, maybe they aren't backing up all the laptops or the desktops. People are saving stuff locally. They're supposed to be saving stuff on a server. Everybody has critical data on their systems. The other thing that's really important to think about is, first, can you recover your data? And the frequency, and that's the little acronym here is RPO, Recovery Point Objective. That's if your systems crash, you got ransomware, whatever happened at 3 in the afternoon, how much data would you lose if you're able to recover from backup? And being able to recover from backup, a lot of actually advanced threats will attack backup. So there's strategies about how to do backup. Like mirroring systems is not effective. Ransomware on one, you got it on the other one. It's kind of game over. The other thing to think about is, so you want to know where is all your data. That's extremely important to know because you have to back up data wherever it is. And the other thing to think about is recovery time objective. And that's how fast you could be up and running again. So for the clients that we work with who are running sort of mission critical applications, or depending on how many employees they have, calculate, if you're down for a week, how much is that going to cost you? That's where recovery time objective is really important. So we will actually put in a business continuity disaster recovery solution, which is like a really souped up backup, so they could be switched over on a new network within minutes or almost instantaneously in that situation. So it's something to understand ahead of time. And we ask folks to really think this through, really get an informed picture of what's going on. So it's how much lost data will you have and how much downtime will you have, and to really think about, when we do a technology business review with you, we'd want to go over that and think about, where is your data, what's protected, what's your recovery point, and what's your recovery time. Some folks will come back to us and say, you know what, it's okay. If we're down for a week or two, we'll deal with it. Other folks will come back, we absolutely can't do that. With the number of employees we have, the cost of our downtime, disaster recovery is a tiny, tiny fraction of the cost. So this is really a business decision to be made, but we strongly recommend, going with full business continuity, or at least, being crystal clear that it exists and making a conscious decision about it. All right, and another one on the list, dark web research. This is just becoming more and more important. Credentials get out there. I think folks who've been on any training with us, you've seen this diagram before, but the surface web, where you go for sort of legitimate business, Yahoo, Google, that's all on the surface. The deeper web is stuff that's password protected, it's databases and stuff like that. But the dark web is where all the bad stuff happens. And that's where credentials, so whenever there's a breach, that's where credentials wind up. And a lot of times there could be months before, TJ Maxx or Target or whoever, it could be months before they announce they had a breach. Yahoo, I think, has breached every single credential they've ever had. over time. But sometimes it's months, it could be even longer than that before they acknowledge it. So dark web monitoring is sort of early warning on that. So we do advise that, or at least to be aware of it. There's other things you can do about password strategies, et cetera, that make you less vulnerable to this as well. But it's important to be aware of. So that's the dark web research on there. And just something we want folks to think about in terms of informed knowledge is think about all the different places you log in to do business, right? On the marketing side, the payroll side, you got a lot of different logins. You think through, does every single person in your organization use a strong and unique password for every single place they log in? And lots and lots of studies will show that they don't. But think about this. You have uh, your system and your credentials are being used for a lot of different places, and you often lose sight of this, but it could be 50 to 70 different passwords that people have. And on the dark web, again, it's not the genius hacker out there. This is from Krebs on security, really great blog on security. But this is just a screenshot showing folks. It's a marketplace. Somebody wants to buy a Citibank credential. There are 17 in stock, and they're $25 each. And that's your stuff. It's being bought and sold on the dark web. So very important to be conscious of when there's breaches. Is your stuff out there, and changing passwords, etc. Another area on that chart that we want to talk about in terms of enhancing your security status is talked a lot about advanced endpoint and detection response. Okay, so that's if you look at your bingo card, that's 3 over and second row on the right. This is we talk about doing Fortify for Endpoint, which is our tool that we use to look for ransomware. And the idea is antivirus is the basic foundation that you have, so we've rolled that out to everybody that we work with under any managed service plan. In this day and age, we're really strongly advising, and really saying it's a must-have to have advanced endpoint detection, because there's a lot of different types of threats. And with the Fortify for Endpoint, which is powered by SentinelOne and the Security Operations Center, we can actually roll back a ransomware attack. And the thing is, we would want everybody we work with to know that that's possible, and to know it's possible before you're in that awful position of being faced with a ransomware attack. You have a lot of options before to prevent and also to enhance your chances of recovery. After disaster strikes, your options are limited, so we at least want folks to be crystal clear on this. The other thing that the Fortify for Endpoint SentinelOne security gives is forensics. Because people will immediately want to know, how did this happen? And you may have to come up with forensics, especially in regulated industries. If you can't prove that the data wasn't actually breached, then, which you may be able to do with forensics, as opposed to like sort of vandalized as opposed to actually breached, you may have reporting requirements in there. The other one that we have on our advanced endpoint is, and probably now about, I think all of our clients with more than like 25 seats already have this. Some of our smaller clients don't yet. We're really strongly advising it. Is Huntress Labs, and that was developed by a former NSA person whose job it was to install stuff in foreign governments. Very knowledgeable about how stuff gets hidden. A lot of times when you read about breaches, one thing is, sometimes people don't report them for a long time. Sometimes people don't detect them for a long time. And what's really important, this is basically, if you think about home security, you might have an alarm that protects your home. But what happens if somebody already got in before you set the alarm? And so that's basically what Huntress Labs does. So it looks for anomalous behavior. So if something's starting to happen, changes in your registry and stuff like that, this is basically an early warning system for that. So it does more than antivirus. All right, in terms of passwords, so passwords, upper right hand on your bingo card, passwords. A lot of things, it's impossible to remember 70 unique strong passwords. So talking about good password hygiene, not reusing passwords, not using simple things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's estimated to account for about 10% of passwords in the world, by the way. And not putting stuff on sticky notes. That's a violation of the Massachusetts data security law. You really need a password manager put in place for that. I'd say number one is education with your team, because it takes 1 weak link to take down your organization. So some of it's just education, and some of it is just consider using a password manager on that. This is a chart that we've shown in the past, but really simple passwords can get cracked by sort of password bots almost instantly. You need longer passwords with characters, numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and they need to be unique. Otherwise, just a simple password cracker could get in, almost instantly. Long passwords, unique passwords, and rely on a password manager. And I like to show this whenever there's a major breach. One of the things that comes out is they just reveal what all the passwords are. So these, if you see your password on this list or any password you use, change it immediately. This is the most popular password. So there's a lot on here that are very, if your password's on here, change it. All right, and then one little thing that we like to talk about is we're doing a big campaign on reboots. And this is totally free, so this is something you can do to enhance your security, enhance the performance of your system, is to remember to reboot regularly. And the way to do that is to hit restart, not the shutdown. Windows 10 has this nice little feature of a fast restart. And the problem, what it does is it really, when you think you're shutting down or you close your lid, it's just putting it in hibernation. It's not really rebooting. You actually want to do a full reboot. And we're starting to do pop-up reminders because every month, again, we have a full-time person looking at this. We wind up with a pretty significant percentage of systems that are reported as in need of reboot. Some security patches need reboots to fully install. Some security patches are sequential and won't install until the previous patch is installed. So this is a way, if you're not rebooting regularly, you're going to fall behind on security patches. All right, so we covered a lot of different items on here. I have just want to show, I'm not going to go into depth, multi-factor authentication. We're trying to put that into place everywhere it's possible. So that's basically something your password, and something you have, basically a code that's going to show up on your smartphone, or there's other ways of doing it, but it's two things that somebody needs to get into an application, always enable that. For VPNs, we are now enforcing that for folks that using two-factor on a VPN connection. Encryption, whenever possible. It's extremely important to know it's actually against Massachusetts law to email protected information. You have to encrypt it. So please be aware of that. There's other ways that you can securely share files, etc. We recommend for any laptop to turn on full disk encryption. In the more modern laptops, it's built right into the operating system. Extremely important to do that. And also mobile device management. So we talked a lot about protecting your PC and everything on your network. And more folks are running applications on iPads, so they don't have the same, they're not running the Windows operating system, they're not getting those security patches. But what if somebody on your team loses a tablet, and that's where you're running your line of business application? You want to be able to do remote wipe on that. You want to be able to restrict applications that get loaded on there. So that's what we mean by mobile device management. So, it's a comprehensive list of things to do. None of these has to be very complicated or expensive, but it is important that the security plan is comprehensive. Then we get into the area of, let's say you put all this stuff in place, just doing a little time check here. If you put all this stuff in place, okay, so one of your employees gets this email in their inbox and it looks good. Wow, 50% off on a trip. I'm going to book now. And would they recognize this as a phishing email? Modern phishing emails are very good. This is actually not from, if you look at what's circled there, it's not from hotels.com. It's from some other email. But would your employee know to look there? Because it takes one person in your organization to click on something like this. This could contain ransomware. It could be phishing for credentials. It could be doing anything. How would you know? This is another one from Costco. Again, can you be 100% sure that no one in your organization would accidentally click on this email? It's tough because as the criminals know that more and more protections are in place, they're getting pretty savvy about how they get stuff onto your network. This is a fake email from Costco. Another one that's out there is there's extortion emails that are circulating around. This is really scary. This kind of thing is really scary to get, but they basically pull credentials from the dark web and they make it look like the email is from you to you and say, I've hacked into your account. As you can see, this email is from your account and I have full access. Very, very scary. It's a total fake. But there's a lot of different variations around this one as well. So uh, how would people know about this? And this is where we come into the human factor of security, and we're really big on this. We do these monthly sessions. I'm going to show you just very quickly before the end of the hour or before folks need to tune off at 1 o'clock. But security awareness is increasingly becoming more and more important. I think we ran a webinar last month. I think I called it the last line of defense. It really is the first and the last line of defense. So you got your firewall, you got your security patches, you got your spam filters, you got all of this stuff in place, and you need to be thinking about, well, what are my employees doing when they're sitting in front of that computer, and are they making the best decisions? And especially as people are remote right now, it's a lot harder to just pop your head, into the next office and say, hey, I got this weird email. What do you think about it? So this is something that we're very concerned about these days. I'm not going to have to click through all the check marks here, but the idea is after you get everything in place, it's important to think about human security and cyber insurance as well. This is a question I get a lot. Folks will say, oh, we have cyber insurance, so we're all set. Well, cyber insurance is important and it will financially cover certain things, not all things, but will help. It won't prevent an attack. It won't prevent you from being down for a couple of weeks. It won't cover all of the cost of that. And in many cases, some threats are defined as acts of foreign terrorism and won't be covered at all. So cyber insurance is important, but I think people sometimes kind of get a false sense of, well, nothing bad will happen to me because I have insurance. Well, the bad thing can still happen. Insurance will help, but that's it. So in terms of the human security, we are more and more advising folks to get on. We have a security training platform, and this just basically kind of keeps it all accountable. Ongoing security training is required by the Mass Data Security Law. It's also required by all of the industry-specific security regulations like HIPAA and financial security regulations, et cetera. And so what this is just a basic platform, not very expensive, and it allows, I'm going back one, it does baseline training, simulated phishing. So if, for example, if you want to know, I wonder if my employees would click on a link like that. We're actually conducting one right now for a large organization that we work with, and they had an 8% click rate going in. And these are folks who are doing training. These types of phishing emails are very cleverly worded specifically designed to get people to click. Simulated phishing tests are a really great way of when they click through and then they get, hey, this was just a training exercise, but in the future, be careful. Extremely important, security policies, et cetera, and then measuring the risk. So this is what I just want to kind of show a little bit about what this looks like, but basically it's a program that allows you to analyze what are the weak links in your organization. So it measures overall how secure everybody is based on, did they do the annual test? Are they doing the weekly micro training? Are they falling for phishing tests? And you can kind of work one-on-one, share the results with the team, et cetera. There's the weekly micro training it's like a 2-minute investment. But what it does is through the course of the year, the bad actors kind of keep coming up with new stuff. And you want to make sure that everybody on your team is aware of what all the latest, the crazy things that the bad actors are doing, like the extortion emails and the, reset your, iTunes password, et cetera. This is what a micro quiz looks like. It's just 4 questions, but it kind of keeps that security at the forefront, and it also helps meet some of the compliance regulations. But I think more and more, what people do, the decisions that they make when they're in front of the computer will make a difference. These are some of the little topics that are covered, but what's a VPN, a coronavirus texting scams, and this is really sad, but there are a ton of cyber threats related to coronavirus, and it's sickening. But the bad actors hijack the news around tax time. It's all about tax refunds, and people will click on that. They're eagerly awaiting their results. There's also a monthly newsletter on that. And the idea is to keep everybody on the same level. And this is an example of the type of, if you want to just, once a month kind of, educate your team and run, bank account low balance. These are some of the examples of the simulated phishing tests that you can run that are probably the best training to get people aware of, oh, you know what? I never thought I'd be the one to click on a link, but I did click on that one. And then folks get certificates for their annual score. The other thing that's included is the dark web monitoring that we talked about. So, more and more we'd like to see the entire organization be cyber aware. All right, and this is just an example of one of the questions. Majority of data breaches happen to large businesses, and we know that is false. All right, and the documents as well. And this one in terms of acceptable use policy. So, for example, are people allowed to use their home PCs? Are they allowed to use a home PC to connect to your network that's shared with other people in their family? Probably don't want a computer where your teenagers are playing all kinds of computer games and doing whatever, also connecting to your work networks. But what are your rules? Years back, we had a situation where a salesperson brought in a laptop to a network, took down the entire network. And there's a really big disconnect between the owner and the salesperson. And the salesperson thought, like, wow, they're really going the extra mile. They're working from home, working long hours. They brought their laptop in the network. And the owner of the business was, I can't believe, you took down our entire network because your laptop was infected. It's important to have even a one-page document that talks about acceptable use, who's allowed to connect your network. Is somebody allowed to bring in their phone and connect it to your office Wi-Fi or not? And these don't have to be complicated. They might just be a couple of bullets long, but it's really important to get everybody on the team on the same page. Or you're going to have these disconnects, and things that you might think are totally obvious are not necessarily obvious to everybody else. And often security is trade-off. There's a trade-off between security and convenience. So once people know the Wi-Fi password for the office network, that's the easy one that they're going to want to connect to. All right, and then kind of to wrap up on some of these items here, in terms of ongoing training, it keeps you more secure. We hope that you're going to join all of our monthly webinars. We really want to see more folks signed up for the security platform. It's not expensive, and it really keeps training up to date. It takes one wrong move to do a lot of damage. It can also help with your insurance premiums. We're also going to be doing a lot of stuff for Cybersecurity Awareness Month starting next Thursday, so stay tuned for that. And keep in mind, actually, the Massachusetts data security law has been in effect now for 10 years, which is hard to imagine. It was released in March of 2010. Hard to believe that time flies, but ongoing training is required by the Mass Data Security Law. All right, and we want to leave folks with the idea that everyone is affected by cyber threats. It's not just big business. It's not just the folks who make the headlines. Everyone is affected, and small businesses are getting half the hits. More and more consumers are going to be, they'll want to know what their small business vendors are doing in terms of security. Threats are increasing. Technology alone is not enough. None of the things I described on like that bingo card of the 15 ways to protect your business, none of them are that expensive, but together they provide you with a very high level of security. Nothing's 100%. Weak passwords are probably something that I think every business needs to talk about. Bring that up in your next staff meeting, but that's a weak link. 90% of malware arrives via email. So what are folks doing when they're sitting in front of that inbox? Are they going to click on the link or not? All right, and then in terms of the must-haves, we're going to be wrapping up right now. It's just about the top of the hour. about the strong technology foundation, and you can go through, download the data sheet, go through, identify the areas that you have protection for. I think we talked about the risks. Each thing protects for a different kind of risk. Together, they give you a really strong level of protection. Get real about strong passwords. Think before you click. The most simple one, and we want to do it, we're doing a huge campaign on this, is reboot your system at least once a week. And keep in mind human security. All right, and with that, you can download this chart. Give us a call anytime if you have questions about this, and kind of go through, with your management team, with your employees, and what are you doing in each of these areas, and make conscious decisions. The foundation of security that I talked about, that stuff you have to do, the security patches, antivirus, firewall, etc. That has to be done. Your backup is essential. And some of these other things, the advanced endpoint detection, security awareness training, spam filters, those are all really important. I'd say must-haves. I understand this is a tough time to be in business, but keep in mind that staying connected, staying online, staying connected is more important now than ever. So you got to keep your network up and running. Be aware of what the different kind of threats are. Ask us questions anytime. We're here to educate. And here's my contact information. Reach out anytime. We do have a blog, so we post a lot of information there. Send us an email. A lot of our prior training sessions are on YouTube. We have a Twitter feed. We're pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So please connect with us, get our updates, ask us questions every time. We're really on a mission to help keep small business networks up and running and secure. And with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Oops. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of the day. And please reach out with any questions. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.